I think we're live. It's working. Good morning, Sonali. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I am
So
great.
excited to be here.
Thank you. I am too. I'm so excited to have you. This is just a dream. So, for the folks who maybe don't know us, I'm just going to introduce both of us. I'm sure everyone knows you, but we'll just go through the bio so we have the facts out of the way. I'm Jeannie DeVita with Romance Writing Academy. So if you're new to us, welcome. We're really excited you're joining us for this live Q&A session with amazing, brilliant, wonderful Sonali Dev. We're going to be talking about everything from craft to the specific book that we put up for the agenda today, which is Recipe for Persuasion, which I adored, but it gives us so much to talk about. We could go on for 3 hours. So we'll take all the comments in the chat and I'll go ahead and share them with Sonali as they come up. So please, all your burning questions, post those in the chat comments, and we will feed them forward and kind of keep things orderly for our guests. So, Sonali, let me introduce you just briefly. I believe, and I want to hear the whole story, but from what we've learned about you recently, you started writing when you were 8, and you had your first piece performed live, which really means the rest of your career had a lot to live up to. You have degrees in architecture and writing. You're a world traveler. You've built a family and an amazing career writing the most unbelievable books. And they really are cross genre. They do so much. They're so ambitious and beautiful. And that's why we're here today, to get to know you a little bit better, talk about your books and also your process. A lot of folks that are participating today or watching are aspiring writers. So we'll definitely pick your brain about some of the details. I hope you don't mind opening up the secrets and sharing.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thank you so much. That's a lot of very generous and kind things. So thank you. Yeah, I can't wait. Bring it on.
Well, yay. Well, why don't we just start with the basics? So really and truly, it's so sweet in your bio. You did start writing at a really, really young age. But how did you get the muse? When can you tell us about how you got into writing and then romance of all things? How did you end up there?
So it's a really easy answer because the truth is I don't remember. I've always written as far back as I can remember. So it wasn't, I'm always very interested when authors know exactly when they kind of the writing bug bit them. But I think I was, I was just born that way. So it's one of my oldest memories. Anyone who's ever attended one of these with me has heard the story, but my mom, when I was my one of my oldest memories is when I was in kindergarten and I was doing my math homework, those big math workbooks with those colorful covers, and I, instead of doing my worksheet, I was writing couplets, these little these little poems on the cover, the pluses and minuses,
Mm.
rhyming things, and instead of yelling at me, my mom got on the phone with her sisters and was all excited about how, oh my gosh, Sonali wrote this adorable poem. So I've always written, when I was really little, my parents always kid about how other kids said, tell us a bedtime story, and I was like, can I tell you a bedtime story? And so I was always writing. But of course, I grew up in India. I grew up, practical and middle class, privileged, but still practical and middle class. So we had to, get a degree that would actually help feed us. And it was anyone who has spent any time in this profession knows that was a very sensible thing to do. But so I went to, so I did not actually think about this as a career, as a viable career, until much, much later in life. So so the way that I actually realized, and I always thought I had the need to write, and I always thought I would, write opinion pieces, and because of course everyone is really interested in my opinion, and that's what this is really about. I really do believe that's what writers are about. It's that we cannot stop opining on things and feeling things about things, and and we want to express it. That's what writing is, right? I mean, that's the heart of it, is that you can't keep your feelings and your emotions and your opinions to yourself, and all the exploration you do of all of that you want to share. And so that kind of is where I think that bug comes from anyway. But so I thought that's what it was going to be, and I never really thought about writing fiction that much. And then my best friend, who is a movie producer, was, kind of what we live on different continents. We've always chatted about our work, and she was once kind of complaining about not finding a good commercial Bollywood, commercial Indian script after she had won something. And well, by something I mean the national award she won for one of her films. And so I, so she said, you know what, and both of us, famous last words, said, how hard can it be? And well, 10 years later, I know exactly how hard it can be. But she said, you know what, you like to write. You should just write me something. And I said, you know what, I will. And so in a few weeks, I wrote this script, which is my book beneath my bed, because it was pretty god awful, but also pretty good. And so what it did was, that was my first experience creating characters and kind of falling into story, and having that experience of actually creating this thing that felt so real, right? Which we all know what I'm talking about. And I think that was it. That was it. Once I had done that, then I just knew this is what I wanted to do. Went to the library, checked out literally a yay high stack of every craft book. And from that point on, that's kind of how I got into it. I was already, I think, well into my 30s, had little babies, so, and why romance was one of your questions. And I've always been a reader. I've always been into stories. And in whatever I read, I was always zeroing in on the love story. That's what I was interested in. And so it was just a natural inclination. I mean, I don't understand how people cannot be interested in the process of love, love, and not just not just romantic love, but I think romance is a genre that explores all love and emotions in general, right? It's a close lens look at emotion. And how can you be human and not be into that? I, completely would spend my time on that rather than death and trying to figure out who killed whom and things like that. Not that I'm judging people who are into that sort of thing.
No, of course not. But love is a lot more optimistic and more fun, except when it's traumatic and healing, and there are so many issues which you don't hesitate to tackle. That's for sure. So you're saying you do have a book underneath the bed that will never see the light of day. Your first attempt, or was that your screenplay?
That was a screenplay. So it's not the first book that I finished was Bollywood Bride. It's also the first one that I sold. Although Bollywood Affair came out first, but that was a two-book deal, and we switched the order. But yeah, I've sold thus far all the books that I have written. But the scripts I have plenty, beneath my bed, plenty.
There you go. So how about when you started studying craft, were you reading romance novels at that point? Were you reading more classic literature? Like, when you decided, I'm going to sit down and learn this, what was sort of your guiding light?
So here's how I actually started. When I wrote that, which was a love story, when I wrote the script, but it was really bananas Bollywood kind of, I mean, I didn't think it was that bananas, but it's pretty bananas. But so that's what I did. And there was very little I knew about storytelling, except as a viewer. But up until that point, I think I got so interested in actually what's going on inside the characters' heads, which is something, I think you have to know as a scriptwriter, but a lot of it is in the hands of the filmmaker, and it's a whole different medium. It's storytelling, but it's a different medium. And I really want to dig into that with words, because I do also actually love words. And the girl who was writing poems about plus signs and minus signs and division signs is, loved the words, and I'm still that. And I kind of so that was what I was really interested in. The first book I started to write, because I took classes at the University of Chicago. They have this lovely creative writing program and all of that. And the book I was trying to write was this really ambitious, um, four couples from four different strata of Mumbai society, and how their lives intersect. And it was, it was this tragic journey, and how one incident kind of has this I'm sorry, I hope my husband picks that up. But this whole, like, a tree falls, and like the ripples and that kind of, so it was this 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 thing, and while I was trying to write it, I was reading, I was doing all the usual craft stuff, and then I got sick, and I was, of course, I was having a really hard time writing this thing. Okay, hold on, give me a minute.
No problem.
Sorry. Okay, so I was, so I was kind of having a hard time with it. I was really miserable when I got sick. And so again, I was whining to my best friend. Why did it have to happen to me? And I was quarantined for a good, I think, 6, 7 weeks. And, I was pretty sick. I had tuberculosis, I had TB, which was, back before everyone was okay with infectious disease, was kind of, oh no, why me? But, but when my best friend says to me, why don't you write something you'd love to read? Which I thought was what I was doing with this book. But then I was like, what do I really crave, right? I crave a really over the top, emotional, life altering love story. And I had this story in my head about this girl who spends half her life growing up in India and half her life with her aunt here, in Chicago. And that's where Bollywood Bride came from. And so within, I sat down and I just wrote it. That was, but by that time I had taken classes, and so I think I've never, and there is structure, right? Romance has its own structure, which I find very comforting. Which was, a lot of it is a very natural fit for me. I like those beats. I'm following emotional arcs, which, the romance structure does, cater to really well. And so yeah, while I don't think craft is different in how you develop characters, or how you, pace, or or how you kind of manipulate a reader's emotion, all of that is craft across genres. But romance has its own structure. So of course I studied both those things.
And once you finished that first book, what was your did you immediately start thinking, I'm going out there with this, I want to publish, or were you really holding it privately for a while?
No, actually, the thing is, for a long time, I mean, the dream was there. Oh, someday, it's like someday I'm going to be Jodie Picoult or whatever, right?
Right.
And so, which is this very, like, back of our mind dream, right? There is a time when you recognize your dream and you say, I'm going to bring this into action, which is a whole different, step. And I did have that. But when I was writing Bollywood Bride, I had, before that, when I was doing the classes at University of Chicago, somebody
Mhm.
had just mentioned in the passing that there was such a thing as RWA, which is the Romance Writers of America, and I didn't even know there was, like, really writing groups. We formed a little. My first writing group was through this class,
Mhm.
which was actually called How to Write a Novel or something like that, basic, right? And
Right.
so she had mentioned it, and I kind of, it had stuck somewhere in the back, like I don't even consciously remember. But then when I wrote this book, I had kind of promised myself that if I finish this book, then I will go out and search for whatever this RWA thing is and join it. And so I really didn't even do a Google search until I had finished the book. And I
Mhm.
remember it was April 30th, I think, of 2010, that I finished the book, and I did a search, and there was a local chapter, and meetings happened 5 minutes from my house. So I called the person, and she was just, not at all what I had expected. She was, you know normal and sweet, and she's like, just come on in, you can do free, you can come on in for free and come to 2 meetings. And she was like really welcoming, and she's like, come. And so when I walked in, I knew nothing. I didn't know what a query is. Like, I was literally, people were like, do you have a finished book? And I was like, I think so. And they said, well, do you have you started querying yet? And I'm like, what's a query? You know, that's where we were at. I had no idea. So everything I learned about the business, I owed to the RWA and my local chapter. And there were people who, and I don't know if you've been part of the RWA. I am not at this moment because of things that happened recently, but I do owe so much of what I know, especially about craft too, but about business, and about getting. I would not, of course, be published if not for the RWA, because there were published authors who took you under their wing. There was, there was a path. Suddenly there was a path. I just had to follow it. until that moment, there was no path. I had written my book, now what? And now there was a path.
Well, I think we have that overlap. I think my mom was a member of the same chapter when you joined, but she wasn't living in Illinois, so she was remote. So we have a little connection. She was a career romance writer too. Shelves. All of this is mom. All this is mom stuff.
Remind us again what her name was.
Sharon DeVita. You're so sweet.
Okay, I'm trying to think. I think I've met her. Have I? I mean, I'd have. Yeah.
You may have. Mom was very, very involved. This was her life and her passion. And so it's very possible. But it just makes me happy to think you might have. Yeah, and that was her process. She was a completely DIY. She learned from the ground up. I think she started writing when she was in her early 30s when my younger brother was born, and she did it the same way. She literally studied other romances, craft books, and she dabbled in other genres, but romance was where she ended up, and she loved it. Now, do you mind if because I feel like I'm completely hogging the conversation. So I just want to remind people, feel free to post in the chat, whatever channel you're watching on, and we'll find your questions and send them along. And I already have a couple for you, so I should probably transition into those. People are wondering about your process. So obviously you started writing with a story that was this dream. You wanted to see the story told that you wanted to read during that time that you were sick, but your projects are so big and so ambitious. I mean, how do you approach starting a series that is that ambitious? Do you have, well, maybe we should start small, like tools. Do you use notebook, pen, paper, software? What's your vision board? Like, how do you start when you get that idea?
So thus far, I've really been fortunate because the stories nudge at me before the idea comes. I'm told a time will come where I'll have to be, what do I write next? And so I didn't, instead of that, I had, these were just ideas that came from somewhere and that kind of lived inside me for a long time, and I wrote it. But in terms of process, what I have, of course, like everybody else, my process is all over the place. It's really, bizarre sometimes and hard to pin down. But for the most part, of course, it starts, and I know a lot of authors say this. Is it starts with character, right? I mean, these characters are where it comes from, but it's not character as in mother in Chicago, right? Or an immigrant mother in Chicago. It is a character with X thing broken about them. So I always think of my stories in terms of there being a problem, which is kind of an amalgamation of character and conflict, because those are like, if I were to give advice to anybody writing, to me, I think that if you have character and conflict in place, it you can get away with you can get away with a plot that's not watertight. You can get away with holes and really annoy people. But if you have no character, and by that I mean a character who's fighting for something, which means conflict, then you don't get people to get into the first chapter, right? I mean, what hooks a person into, so to me that's what comes first. So since we're talking about recipe today, the whole place that book came from is that there is this girl who has been broken by her parents, awful marriage. And this is a thing that's very universal. This is a thing that is such a part of our world. And I want, uh, I'd be foolish to say it's such a part of our world today. Yeah, sure, divorce is easy today. That doesn't mean that there weren't bad marriages, right? Bad marriages as old as humanity, or as at least as old as marriage. So, and children suffer the brunt of it, right? I mean, you have no tools to handle the one thing that is supposed to be stable in your life, right? And yet it is not something that we would say to any man or woman that they should stay in a bad marriage because you have children, right? But every parent who goes through that, one of the things foremost in their mind is how to make this easiest on our child, which is something when people aren't able to do, as in Ashna's case, means lifelong damage. Plus, she is the person she is. So that's what I mean by, so that's kind of where it starts from, right? And so also every one of these stories is X is broken, and the character finds a way to to fix that. And I don't mean that by suddenly magically these people are going to be different people, but they find a way to be okay with that damage, right? To be whole again. And I think that if you're not whole again, then you cannot let love into your life. And that's the classic romance journey for me, which is to a character finding a way to be whole, so that they can allow love into their life. So that kind of is at the most macro level my process, which is that I get these characters and then I kind of figure out, and sometimes it is I have X character, and then you think about what is the right fit, what challenges either this character the most, or what allows this character to breathe, right? Depending on how and where this character's at. And so then the other person is kind of a foil to it. Now, because Recipe for Persuasion, Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors and Sense and Sensibility, as the title suggests, are thematic homages to Jane Austen's novels. There was there was a theme from her novels that I was digging into, and there was little bit of plot and character, but it's mostly the theme that appealed to me about that book that I'm kind of exploring. And so with Recipe for Persuasion, it was second chances, and healing and growing up, right? From because and growing up specifically when it comes to how your family and your social world influences you, and it influences all of us. And one large part of growing up is to find out if those are your thoughts, or they are thoughts that are that you simply have just taken as reality, dogma, right? So it's, what is that, what are you questioning? And I think that's growth that everyone should go through. I'm just going to judgmentally put that out there, is that we're all raised with someone else's views and coming into our own. And Persuasion is at its heart about that. She's too young and undeveloped for various reasons to question when she is told that this person is not good enough for her, right? And as women, we are raised to believe that the world knows what's best for us, or at least that's how it used to be. And then for me, particularly growing up in India, there was a very popular trope in stories, in movies, in, not even just in stories. You heard these stories in your living room, right? Where, where a woman was forced into a marriage with someone not of her choosing, and ended up being really happy when she accepted that and gave it her best. Lemonade, limes, lemonade, lemons, lemonade, and margaritas, and all of those. We've heard all the cliches, and I thought that, and we've seen this in literature across the board, I think. And of course, you make lemonade from lemons, but to tell that story is to I think a very insidious way to take agency away from women. It is to tell them that others know what is best for you, that what you want isn't as important as making what you get good. And I think women have been taught this over and over again. And so I wanted to write a different kind of woman. I wanted to, which is, Shobi, I wanted to write a woman who says, no, I will not make this okay for everybody. And there's collateral damage, and the collateral damage is our, protagonist. And I was just, so then it kind of, snowballs from there. And then my process is to actually take a notebook and and a pencil and draw little bubbles and write little, turning point notes, and then translate that into, scenes on paper. If I try to translate that into scenes in an outline, I'm sunk. I kind of get really like it doesn't work for me. So I have to have the arcs and the changes, emotional changes and character changes, but how they happen in terms of scene has to happen when I'm typing it.
Did you, I mean, it's so ambitious to take even a thematic retelling of Austen. Did you start there wanting to actually do that with these characters, or did you start with the family and think, what is the best way to tell all of these stories? Like, which came first for you, Austen or the Raja family?
That's such a great question because I don't think I know the truthful answer. I do know that I had this dream of, retelling Austen, my four favorite novels, under one story umbrella. That was kind of my grand plan, and I'm really waiting for all four books to be out on the shelves because I keep feeling like something is going to go wrong because I've wanted to do this for so long. And so to have those four under one story umbrella was kind of this thing I've always wanted to do. It's, this dream I've always had. So there was that, and then so that, but I didn't want to just do it where it was scene by scene. I didn't just want to translate Regency England into Indian society. I didn't want, that's been done many, many times. It's been done well, it's been done badly, it's been done, and that was not at all what I was interested in. So so I think I have always been fascinated by royalty, but really, when I realized how I was going to do this, so these are the themes, right? With Pride and Prejudice, it is the themes are, judgment, seeing a person and judging them, and basically whomever we meet being holographic projections of our own mind, right? Are we really seeing people? Is someone really seeing you? I mean, especially being a brown woman in America, it's very obvious when I meet people what they see first, right? How surprised they are by things, that they would not even question if they met another person who looked like them, had the same accent. So I see this very closely, and I'm able to be amused by it mostly, rather than infuriated. But it is part. But it's not a unique experience to me, right? It's a experience you've had where people have judged you before you opened your mouth, right? Or you've opened your mouth meaning to say X and you've ended up saying Y, and then they've judged you. This is what we're constantly doing. And Pride and Prejudice is about that, but it's also about imbalance of power, right, between two parties, and self-worth and where that fits in. Because here is this woman who has zero power in that dynamic, but still has enough self-worth to say, I deserve better than you, to someone who has so much power. And that person then realizing, that just because I have power and just because I have good intentions doesn't mean I have been behaving as the best version of myself, and then doing something to make that journey to being the best version of themselves, right? And everyone doing this without losing their core of who they are. And so that was kind of the theme. And so to explore these themes, one of the main things that I kind of had to, in terms of practical terms of story, had to come up with was so Darcy is at the top of the privilege pyramid of his time, right? So what is the privilege pyramid of our time? What is the checklist that gives you a leg up and a leg up and a leg up and a leg up, right? And so there was wealth, there was education, there was brilliance, right? Just the brain you're born with, generational wealth, race, religion, all of that. And so I knew gender, huge big thing, would generally all the way to the top, probably race and gender, but so that was not going to change. So she had, because I wanted to explore this as an Indian woman with an Indian family, so the race was not going to change, and I wanted to do the gender flip because I wanted to see if in today's day and age we can write a woman who owns her gifts and her privilege and her brilliance, and doesn't apologize for it, who can be a Darcy. And so the gender was not going to change and the race was not going to change. So I had to pile every other kind of privilege I could on top of Trisha. And kind of the Rajes comes from their political power, a family that's has had generational political power, has had it taken away, has found a way to find it back in their home country, and has built it in their new home country. And so that's kind of, so it was all these things happening together.
And did you ever feel, because the themes that you attack are so ambitious and deep, and they're not escape reads, like they're not, you just want to feel good and get lost in the problem. Did you have pushback at any point along the way? Did people say, this is not a romance, this is too heavy? People are like, how was that process when you were sharing your work and trying to get published? Were you very clear on your vision and how you wanted this to go regardless, or did you not have feedback? Were you surprised by what you found?
So it's an ironic question and an ironic answer because there was no space. That is the honest truth. When I started to try to sell this, nobody was being published in mainstream America writing this, right? There was, the only diversity we saw was was some very, very little Black romance, which again was kind of pigeonholed to death. Beverly Jenkins was, doing amazing. People like Beverly Jenkins and Brenda Jackson, Shirley Hillstock, they were doing amazing work because they were doing this without any hashtags or anything. They were pushing along. As far as, cultural immigrant cultures, there was we were allowed to write literary stories in which we showed immigrant suffering. That was the only story niche afforded to us. So there was, writing an all an out and out romance with two Indian protagonists was unheard of. Was I have had back then editors look me straight in the eye and say that there is no way that we can sell two Indian protagonists. Change one of them to white. To date, we see so much of that happening, but not all of it is that. So so there has literally been a revolution almost in these past 10 years, in these past 5 years, because the first 5 years was just spinning your wheels almost. So there is so there was no comps, right? And one of the first roadblocks is that there are no comps. So when you go to an editor, what's your comp? My comp is Christina Lauren. And no, it's not, and so, but it is. It absolutely is Christina Higgins and Christina Lauren. And because those are the exact stories, it's just a different culture, right? And so there's no so that was step one. Now I don't know whether, because Bollywood Affair, which was my first book, was this over the top, very Bollywood-esque kind of, story in terms of storytelling, stylistically. But again, in terms of theme, there was, social issues. She's a child bride. There's a star, and the whole lack of privacy and what our world does to celebrities. And so there were things, and I don't think I have much of an interest in not saying anything through my stories, which is not to say that people who tell, I think every story I have an interest in reading is saying something, is actively trying to say something. That can be a very small something that just a person just learns how to say no or learns how to say yes, right? I mean, just a simple thing, learns to tell people, this is what I want. Let's do what I want for a change. So even small things like that. I want stories in which the author is saying something. And so I have no interest in stories that don't say anything. As far as the heavy topics go, so again, Bollywood Affair was very over the top, and it was funny, and so there was breathing room around even the heavier topics. Even the heavier topic. Now, a child bride is not really a relatable conflict for most readers. I would say, like, for all readers. I don't know how many child brides have read mine. There's very few in the world, thank heavens. There can never be few enough, but who are reading my books, I'm guessing. But But Millie is a very relatable character, and so all the time I got, um, I still can't believe I could relate to this girl, or I still can't believe I can, I understand this character. And, and while that stuff happened, I have gone into other kinds of trauma, which is more relatable, which starts becoming harder because, if
Yeah.
I'm writing a rape victim, there's, um, you know, it's not like writing a child bride, because while people have the experience of having to take have to, because in a sense that story is about someone whose life has been set by choices made by others for them, right? That's the heart of it. But and so people have to make that translation between their trauma and the trauma of the character. But when you're writing directly about someone, who who has been a victim of sexual violence, then that starts becoming, that's a more, there's few layers between a reader who might have experienced something like that and that character. And so then so there are books which people have found heavier to consume. There are books that people have found easier to consume. Distant Heart is about a girl who is stuck in a bubble, right? Because she has aplastic anemia, and she's 12 years she's stuck in a bubble, having literally being forced to live. So people who've suffered from long illnesses, that's a more direct, and some people like to see that, and it's freeing, and some people would rather not read that. And so when you're writing heavy topics, you try to do it in the most sensitive way, whilst being as authentic as you know how, you know. And so I guess the answer to that would be that I have not given too much thought to commercial success in that way,
Mhm.
and I'm not saying that's how I should continue being, but I have written the stories I've wanted to write, and because there were no comps and because there is no existing market, um editors who were interested and editors who loved my work, had nothing to compare it against. And so it was able to go out there. I mean, that's just one guess, but yeah.
First in class, but hopefully not last.
Well, I won't even say first. There was a bunch of us, so I certainly and very firmly stand on the shoulders of of other women, of Miss Bev and Brenda and Nalini, and I mean, there's so absolutely not first in class, no.
We have some wonderful questions specifically too about Recipe for Persuasion. So this one's a little long one, but I'll summarize it for you. So talking about those broken characters and especially the trauma and making people whole, how do you balance? You've specifically too technically, maybe we can focus on persuasion and ask, you put a third POV in the book, which is very uncommon for romance. So maybe you can talk about redemption, how to balance making those broken characters, and then actually mechanically how you did it, because you gave us a lot of, of another storyline. There's not just one romance in Recipe for Persuasion.
Yes, Recipe for Persuasion, I think, is as much of a love story between mother daughter as it is. I think the trick is in relevance, right? Those two women and their journeys are so tied together that I think that neither one's journey to wholeness or healing can be complete without understanding the other story. So
Mhm.
so that had to happen
Yeah.
for so it was, having Shobi's point of view in there was very crucial to the story, in terms of, if we didn't understand Shobi, then Ashna could never heal fully, right? And if Ashna could not understand Shobi, she could not heal. And her forgiveness, because very often in mother daughter stories, the forgiveness is from, she did the best she could, right? And I just have to understand this to be whole. But in this particular case, the heart of their suffering, or the cause of their suffering, is is common, and them understanding that that was part of the journey. So it was again a very natural part. Now in Change of Heart, there's 5 POVs. So it's been in terms of ambition, Change of Heart. I think Change of Heart and Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors might be my 2 most ambitious, just in terms of mechanics books. But yeah, Change of Heart had 5 POVs, so this one has 3. But so I'm trying to understand the question. When so usually I have one broken character and one whole character, even if the whole character has surface cracks. And I talk about this in a lot of my books, right? We all have pain and we all have surface cracks. So it's just part of being human, right? Things have broken us, but we're cracked on the outside. And there are just things about how you're born, or how you're raised, or what the world gives you as you're growing up, which again is part of the privilege conversation, that makes your core unbroken. And an unbroken core then makes it easier and easier to live with surface cracks, right? A lot of my books are about this. So when I have to, so between Rico and Ashna does not have surface cracks. She has core cracks, and Rico has surface cracks. So while horrible things have happened to him, at the time when his core was developing, he had love, he had, self-worth. So he is not broken on the inside. And there is some of that transference and learning that happens between couples, right? Where a character is able to see their own internal cracks, because they see that this person has suffered these things too, but this is how they reacted, and I reacted this way, so what do I need to fix about myself, right? And so it's not so much, it's not the exact same journey, it's 2 different journeys, and where the crossover is the point at which they learn from each other, or the point at which they realize the mistakes they've made and how they can flip that. I hope that answers the question. So
I think so. That made absolutely perfect sense to me. And it leads into another question, sort of about working with Austen or any retelling. Did you feel that pressure then? Because, inspired by Persuasion or Austen, but yet you had these very specific characters and goals in mind for them. Did you feel at any point that was harder for you, or did having a retelling, even though it was more of an homage or a loose retelling, did it help? Did it hurt? How was that process for you?
That's a hard question for me to answer, because I have tried not to dwell in that, in that mindset. So all I knew was I was not going to transfer word to word, right? And but I also knew I wanted spirit. I want the spirit to transfer. So there've been, an interesting story is in Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors. Julia Wickham's name was not Julia Wickham. She had a different last name, and my editor was like, "Why don't we call her Wickham? So there's instant recognition for somebody who is an Austenite." And my editor is an Austenite, so she, and that has worked really, really well. It brought something more to Julia's character, who, I do think that as a villain, Julia was, and I'm very proud of how Wickham transferred, right? Because she has all the chilling sense of victimhood that Wickham has. So all the things I wanted to transfer about Wickham, Julia Wickham transfers. But but then again, that wasn't something that I wrote with. That was literally like a post edit. Would you think about this? And my editor is always really lovely about that. And I was like, that's a brilliant idea. Let's we could totally do that. And so every once in a while I'll try to Rico's name was not Rico. It was when I first started writing him. I'm not even going to tell you what it was, but it was different. And he's Frederick Wentworth, and so we did Frederico, and so with DJ, the whole Darcy James thing is confusing to people because it's a gender swap, and he's really Lizzie Bennet, but I still, wanted to bring the homage in. And so their mother, Emma and DJ's mother, is a huge Austen fan. And so she names her kids after, so it's kind of this whole, although we name girls Darcy now, so I could have just got, I don't know how it, but a lot of it is just naturally things that come to me. So I'm not, I do, before I start out, I will, like I'm writing the Emma book right now. And
Mhm.
so I did, before I started, list out the turning points of Emma, the original, as I know them. To me, these are the turning points. This happens and this happens. Her governess gets married, and that makes her feel like she's, this great matchmaker. And so things like that, right? What changes? What changes? What changes? So at the back of my head, then I have, even though, again, Emma, that I'm writing right now, which comes out after Incense and Sensibility, is a gender swap again. It's, Knightley is female, and Emma is the youngest Rajay brother, because he's such an Emma, right? And so, so some of it is just in that somebody who's, been so closely family for so long, and has this, this large age gap, and has kind of, so there are things thematically, and there's this whole noblesse oblige. I'm charity. Is charity, or is charity something we tend to do to make ourselves feel good, and our guilt at our own privilege, which is, I think, which are the themes that are important to me from Emma. And so those things will stay at the top of my mind, but I don't think that there's a really like a I have never sat down. I mean, this was something I wanted to do, so it's never been, oh darn it, I don't know how, this is really hard to try to make this work, because I'm not trying to make a particular thing work. I'm doing it my way.
Mhm.
So
And that's, I think, what's so inspiring and exciting is I think authors breaking out feel like there's maybe one way, right way to do this if you want to be traditionally published. And if I'm going to just do it my own way, then I have the indie market. But you're creating a path forward that allows your stories to be told your way and that does things that we might not expect. I mean, the 3 POVs, the multiple, that alone, that's the most minor example, but also the way that you take these themes. And one of the things I loved most about Persuasion was just how full, I mean, it feels like an epic family story more than, anything else, the love story that's we might be there for. We specifically want Rico and Ashna to get together. We want that happiness. But the scenes that made me the most emotional and I was so gutted by were without a doubt Shobi. I mean, the mom deserves her own spin-off novel. Not that you don't have plenty of works in the lineup, but some of those scenes, I mean, how do you feel? I mean, you've already talked about the commercial success and whether or not you feel like you're writing to the market, which is so interesting to hear about. But has anything surprised you? Has reception of the books, how much people love them, the things that people identified as not connecting with? What about actually now being the successful author has surprised you?
I think touched would be, a more appropriate thing. I get emails that, make me sob. No
Oh.
kidding. Like I will, that's, there's many really good things about getting to do this, but getting to read an email that makes you sob is pretty spectacular. Like it's really, really lovely. And the things that touch people are really interesting. Now there are things about my books that touch me to some extent. I think of Recipe for Persuasion as my feminine rage book. I have a lot of feminine rage. I think we all do somewhere, but I have a lot of it. um because there was, I don't know. Ever since, I've always seen patriarchy everywhere, right? In fact, and so, and it bothers me. I won't even make any bones about it. It really, really bothers me, and so much of why I write is that the fact that it bothers me so much. But so Recipe for Persuasion was overt
Mhm.
feminine rage, and I love Shobi for giving me that outlet, because in those terms, Shobi is me. She's all feminine rage, right? And it does not unsoften her. It does not, make her love less or any of that. So to me, a lot of what is special about that book has to do with that. And of course, I love Rico, but that's a whole different question. I mean, a whole different topic. But I will get, I'll get just people seeing things I put in there, right? Which I think is just for me. Today someone did an Instagram post with a line from Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors, which is, which was, I think she wanted the waves to hit everyone the same way, so that they could choose how they wanted to surf it. And that's very much, it's very special to me, because that moment when Trisha realizes, right, she realizes what she has not seen, right? It to me, I've had several moments like that in my life. I wish people had more of them, right? I want to shake people to have more of them, but a lot of that is for me. I want to say that. So when readers see that, I won't say it's surprising anymore, but it's very, very touching and special. Also, I think with Ashna's panic attacks, or with even so with Trisha, when I wrote Emma, that was a very, very sensitive thing, sensitive path to go down, because I was actually writing a person who is refusing to have surgery, because they're and to do that without being ableist, right? Because at no point did I want that book to make anyone feel like I think death is better than blindness, because it's absolutely not. But here is someone who is struggling with that for a reason. But it's amazing how many, and I had writer friends who said, you're asking for trouble by doing this, right? I mean, that's what you're not saying that, but people are going to say that's what you're saying, because that's how, that you're going to have hordes, with pitchforks. Don't do it. It just, and so I refined it and refined it and refined it to make sure that it would not at all ever hurt someone's feelings, if I could help it, right? In the end, a book is a reader's once it's in their hands. But I get the most beautiful, beautiful, beautiful emails from people who are suffering from various, who have been through degenerative, hearing loss and vision loss, and have fought that fight, that have felt seen. And I think 1 million copies sold would be great, but this feels like that.
Well, I truly cannot thank you enough for sharing so much. I could ask you 1,000 more questions, especially about Recipe for Persuasion, which I loved, I adored. I loved how you treated the father. Maybe it was a moment of feminist rage, but these stories and the way that they tell them don't have to be tied up with a pretty bow, where everyone gets their redemption and their happy moment at the end. So I love your work, and I'm so grateful you've spent the time with us. Can we give everyone just a look ahead to what you've got? You've got Incense and Sensibility this summer, and what else we can expect to see from you in the coming months?
So Incense and Sensibility is the sensibility homage, and so hard to guess, but it is also Yash's story. So the oldest brother, the kind of the series is bookended by this gubernatorial race. So the oldest Rajesh sibling is running for California governor. It's kicked off when he makes that decision, Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors, and the last book is after it ends. So this is set 3 months before the election. And so I think a lot of people have been waiting for Yash's book. It's, Yash is one of those characters, the moment he touches the page, he just takes over the scene. And, he just has, has always been this magic character for me to write. And it's also really interesting because we've only seen Yash through his sister's eyes thus far. So that's one Yash, but Yash is a mess. in so many ways, but he's a beautiful mess. So it was really lovely to write him. So I'm really excited about this book. Kicks off with a hate crime that makes Yash kind of lose his way, and the only way for only person who can help him, of course, is this yoga guru and stress management coach who's his sister's friend, and won't leak it to the media. And so, as we all know, everybody believes him to be engaged to someone else for the past 10 years, right? So he's Edward Ferris, so of course he's engaged to someone else. And so it's, yeah, I'm really excited about that. And it's coming out July 7th, July 6th. Because of the whole 6/7, 7/6 thing, I get really confused. I think it's 6th. It's not 7/7. Yeah, it's July 6th. And I'm working on the Emma book, and that should be the summer after. And I think I'm working on a few other exciting things, but we don't know for sure yet.
Well, I cannot thank you enough for spending so much time with us. This has been so, riveting. I could just continue to listen to you talk about these characters and your process for days. But we do have to give you back your Sunday. If anyone streaming, watching would like to follow Sonali, purchase her books, we've got some links that you can click to find, not on the stream, but on our Facebook page, and follow Sonali on all her social channels, sign up for her newsletter, because you will not want to miss any of the amazing books and stories coming up. So thank you, Sonali. I have loved spending the time with you. We really appreciate you, and can't wait to see the next work to come out this summer.
Thank you so much. I've really had fun. Thanks for taking the time. It's wonderful.
You are wonderful. We'll talk soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.